Guys, welcome to classic online class. Today we're gonna be looking on the one of the African poem named Vanity. Before furthermore, let's first of all know the meaning of the poem in literature. So a poem refers to a totality to the deployment of a certain devices such as figures of speech, feelings, rhyme and reading, stanzaic division, meter, subject matter in the body of words in order to express an idea or one's expression. In that what it says attracts attention to itself because no one may have said it in that manner before. In this poem Vanity, Birago Diop mapped out the sum of the things that started happening when the colonial masters came into African countries. Besides, let's read out the poem. If we tell gently, gently, all that we shall one day have to tell, who then will hear our voice without laughter? Sad complaining voices of beggars, who indeed will hear them without laughter? If you cry roughly of our torment, every increasing from the start of things, what eyes we watch our large mouth, shaped by the laughter of big children? What ears will watch our large mouth? What heart will listen to our clamoring? What ear to our pitiful anger, which grew in us like a tumor, in the black depth of our painful throat? What our dead with their dead, when they have spoken to us with their clumsy voices, just as our ears were deaf to their crisis, to their wide appeal, just as our ears were deaf, they have left on the air the cries, in the air, on the water, what they have traced there, their signs. For us blind, deaf and unworthy sons, who see nothing of what they have made, in the air, on the water, where they have traced their signs. And since we did not understand our dead, since we have never listened to our crisis, if we weep gently, gently, what if you cry roughly of our torment? What heart will listen to our clamoring? What ear to our sobbing heart? Okay, now we're gonna look at the background of the play. So the poem is all about the things that started happening when the colonial masters came into Nigeria in the name of colonizing us, civilizing us. So now we kind of look at the background of the play, of the poem. With the colonization of Africa and the subsequent introduction of Western values and ways of life, many Africans, especially those educated in the Western ways, consciously distance themselves from the traditional belief, practice and general way of life of their people. They saw in the light of their white master would have them do. They saw them as primitive, retrogressive and even barbaric in the French West Africa from where the poet comes. The assimilation policy introduced as a system of administration by the Imperial French actually set out to achieve this in the name of making Frenchmen out of the native and granting them equality, liberty, and fostering fraternity among all. The discovery of the contrary Africa who later visited or went to school in France, and the consequent realization that African values and way of life are not inherently inferior, provided the background to the poem. Yeah, the people that later went to school from the Africa later realized that the African way of life is not inferior is not inherently inferior, because the whites thinks the whites then always look down on us. But when the people from Africa later go to school, they realize that we are still human beings like them. So now let's get to the setting of the poem. The setting of the poem is Africa, though it could be narrowed down to French West Africa or Senegal. Yes, of course, it's in Africa. The capital of French colonies in the sub-region, especially where a lot of first French citizens had been made out of Africans. The temporary setting is clearly the colonial era or the pre-independent period. It was a period where most of the new African educated elites, especially in French West Africa, were eager to become French citizens and enjoy the perceived privilege which went with it. It was an era of craze for white values and civilization, as well as conscious attempt to denigrate African values or look down on the few who treasured it among the new educated elite. Psychologically, it was a time when many of the new educated elites grappled with cultural complex and inferiority complex for the matter. Let's look at the subject matter, the summary of this play. The summary of this play is just all about telling us that we shouldn't live our culture, the way of life we've been living before, because of the new culture the white man people came with. Because many of us emerged when the new ways of life emerged. Some people left our nature, our mother's life, the way we live before. So that is what the subject matter all about. The poem is telling us that the poem addresses the need for Africans not to neglect their past or roots. Obviously, the poet persona is concerned about the abandonment of ancestral ways and teaching of the ancestors as obtainable in the traditional African society by the westernized generation of Africa. In addition, there is a preoccupation with the need to look inward in the effort to solve the challenges faced by the continent. There are suggestions to the effect that turning eyes or ears in the direction will not do much, if any good. The poet, therefore, warns that if this trend is not promptly reserved, Africans stand the risky of becoming the laughingstock of others. You can see the poetic persona is a kind of telling us that if we didn't stick out from this white man culture in this poem, that we should stand the risk of becoming the things that people will be looking at and be laughing. Look at the detailed explanation of the poem. In stanza 1, line 1 to 5, you can see where the poem is lamenting, talking all about how the people left their culture and emerged in a white man culture. In this stanza, the poet wonderingly comments on the reluctance of Africans to address a certain issue of serious concern. According to him, this issue, which he is yet to disclose, is being talked about in hushed tones and not give enough attention it is. An issue which should not only be discussed openly but loudly too. Because of this, any delay will make us object of others' laughter. In addition, any complaints resulting from our current apathy would make us not any better than sad complaining voices of beggars. You know, that is where he said that okay. Here, the poet uses a paradox to subtly mock our situation for beggars are not expected to complain. Yeah, he said if we continually in this new culture, that that we should that we are going to be kind of sad complaining voices of beggars. Detail stanza, second stanza, line 6 to 10. In this stanza, the poet Pesna goes on telling us that this stanza carries the poet's wonder forward. Yeah, it carries the poet's wonder why people left culture and emerged in white man culture. He wondered who will pay us attention if we complain about our pains, which have been there for ages. This wonder is predicted on the fact that we have not done the right thing by ourselves, by living our culture, that we have not done a right thing by living our culture. It is still linked to the fact that we have not addressed our challenges in the right way. By describing our mouth as large one, the poet further shows the pointlessness of complaining while abandoning the right courses of action. Get to stanza 3, the third stanza, line 11 to 14. In a style repeating what we have in first and second stanza, it was a kind of giving a repetition from the first stanza to the second stanza, because this has been taught in first stanza. The poet rhetorically asks again whether there is any who will pay attention to our complaints and anger, which he seems to consider unjustifiable. In the fact, he likened such kind of anger to a growing tumor, which is self-inflicted and self-nurtured pain. Well, then the fourth stanza, line 15 to 24. Let's go on. This stanza provides the details of why the poet wonders if there is anyone who will listen to our complaints, or if we do not deserve to be mocked. We are informed that when our ancestors come, the way they normally do as spirits, to give us advice and direct us, we turn deaf ear to them. Even when they cried and plead with us on certain courses of action, we still remain deaf to the entreaties. This is further compared to the way we have equally abandoned their teaching as left behind in cultural artifacts and natural elements around us. We have removed to see as much as we have refused to listen to the teaching of our progenitors. For this reason, the poet declares us blind, deaf, and unworthy sons. Stanza, line 25 to 30. This is the last stanza of this poem. This stanza recaps all has been said in the previous four. It is clearly stated the reason why complaining about our plight deserves no sympathetic understanding. We do not deserve being given attention if we now complain because we have also refused to listen to the voices of wisdom. This poem is quite understandable. Well, now the themes of the poem. The theme of abandonment of traditional values. And in this poem, the poem comments on the tendency of African educated elites and other westernized Africans to abandon African wisdom, values, and general traditional way of life. Because many of these people have been led into believing that African ways of life are primitive and barbaric. They embrace foreign values and become uninterested in their own people's value. The poet condemns this in strong terms, dismissing those culpable in this regard as worthless offspring, while urging that it is unwise to abandon the traditional ways, the poet also suggests that foreign values will not help because the abandonment is intentional. The poet notes that unpleasant experience may attend to it. Now, the second theme, the theme of wisdom of ancestors, is invaluable. Yes, the theme, this theme is good. The poem presents ancestors as a reservoir of sound teaching and wisdom, which are sufficient to guide their offspring through the challenges of life. This teaching and wisdom are described as cries and wide appeal in this poem. With such description, the poet suggests that the ancestors are not only in earnest, they are unsparing in the effort to have their children properly guided. Unfortunately, the children are not interested in listening to their voices. The ancestors also leave behind them signs in the natural element as guides to the living. The poem therefore suggests that the only thing that can prevent the living from becoming object of scorn and enjoy the patronage of the ancestors is to heed their words and signs. Now the third theme of warning to regard. In spite of the dominance or presence of other themes in the poem, the entire poem can be summarized as a warning to renegade. Yes, the poem is preoccupied with a warning to those who have been choosing not to listen to the voices of elders, voice of wisdom, and voice of the ancestors. Parts of the poet's warning include the fact that continued refusal will earn nothing but regret and ridicule. Instead of sympathizing with us when grappling with our self-inflicted wonders, people will simply laugh at us. The fourth theme, the theme of pain and misery. Another important theme of the poem is that of misery and pain. This theme is linked to the vanity of those who consider foreign ways superior and more desirable than Africa's. Their action is certain to bring about some adverse consequences, which include sadness, mockery, and pain. The poet observes that we would become sad complainers, attracting nothing but others' mockery should be for to promptly address the renegade tendencies of our fellow westernized Africans. The same thing would happen if we merely lament over our pains and challenges instead of taking the right step to get round them, which is to heed the wisdom of our forebears. The pain and misery referred to are, however, not physical ones but psychological ones. Some words which easily draw attention to the issue of pain and misery in the poem include tumor, pitiful anger, painful throats, torments, complaining, cry roughly, weep, clamoring, and sobbing hearts. Of the languages used in the poem. In presenting his point, the poet extensively makes use of rhetorical questions as a question which does not anticipate any answer from the listener. The poet actually makes a number of statements with the questions. For example, What, for example, what heart will listen to our clamoring is a rhetorical question. What ear to our pitiful anger? As well, a rhetorical question. Which grow in us like a tumor, in then black depth of our painful truth. Yeah, these ones are rhetorical questions, the questions that doesn't deserve an answer. Now, the second languages that is used in the poem is repetition. In literature, there is a figures of speech repetition. Yeah, the repetition in this poem, the use of repetition in the poem is also quite extensive. Yeah, for example, if we tell gently gently in line 1, yeah, you can see this in line 1. This is a repetition. If we weep gently gently, what eyes will watch our large mouths? Yeah, this is line 8 and 10. Just our ears were deaf, as in line 17 and 19. Then we still have a language sarcasm in the poem. There is a certain humor or sarcastic tone to the poet's reference to our large mouths. Line 1 to 8 and line 8 and line 10. Yeah, you can see this in line 8 and line 10 of the poem, as well as the description of the voice as sad and belonging to beggars, line 4. Why this expression, especially the second one, highlights the misery of those who have neglected the ancestral ways, it also invokes a weary laughter. Wow, guys, I know you could enjoy the class. Well, now let's look at the biography of the poets Birago Diop. Birago Diop was born in Okam in 1906 and died in Dakar, Senegal in 1989. He trained in France as a veterinary surgeon. While studying in France, he met the advocate of the Negro movement called Negritude, one of whose leaders was his compatriot and contemporary Leopold Sédar Senghor. He also subscribed to the Negritude ideology and became involved in its propagation, especially through his writings. As an artist, he wrote several poems, a play, memoirs, and short stories, most of which were adapted from his folklore. His most popular narrative is Tale of Amadou Komba in 1947, as seen in Vanity. Wow, guys, I hope you enjoyed my class. Thanks, and subscribe to get more. I will be uploading next video next week. See you then.
Hey there. Subscribe to my channel. And also press this bell icon.